So I just want to share a little bit about Cagj. So I think a lot of you are familiar with our work, but I just want to give an introduction. So we were founded by activists who organized to shut down the World Trade Organization in 1999, and we carry that legacy very proudly and try to honor the anniversaries, make sure that history stays alive in Seattle and beyond. We were born out of a people's uprising, and we really try to carry that spirit forward. We're membership driven. We're structured to build leadership. So we're guided by our members who decide on our organizing priorities, and volunteers really make it happen. Folks can join our committees, our organizing collectives. Generally, they're guided by one staff and some part-time staff, and we have some here that we'll be recognizing today. Our mission is to strengthen the global food sovereignty movement through community education and mobilization. We build solidarity across movements through grassroots, community-based organizing, and a commitment to ending all forms of oppression. We work to transform unjust trade and agricultural policies and practices imposed by corporations, governments, and foundations, i.e. the Gates Foundation. We promote alternatives that embody values of racial, social, and environmental justice, collective liberation, solidarity, community self-determination, and ecological health. And I'm really proud of those values. They're part of our strategic planning process we've done over the last few years. We've been digging in deep. It's kind of taken longer than usual because of COVID, but we restated our values and put a lot of energy into choosing those values I just shared with you. We use community education, grassroots organizing, research, and media to organize, always using an anti-oppression framework to end racism and other forms of oppression as we work for global justice. So we organized towards food sovereignty, which was first coined in 1996 by La Via Campesina, a global social movement led by peasant farmers, having a really interesting conversation within National Family Farm Coalition, which is one of the coalitions we're a part of, about whether farmers in the U.S. identify as peasants and why that word has a pejorative meaning oftentimes. So that's something I'm excited about exploring. Food sovereignty is really about democratizing the food system, right? So this means that people working across the food system should have the power and control rather than profit-driven corporations. So that's what we're fighting for together. Thanks for the clap, Alicia. Let's hear it for food sovereignty. Yes. Woo! What did they say? Globalize the vote. Globalize. All right, so it is my honor, great honor, to introduce our keynote tonight, Black Star Farmers. Woo! Their keynote is titled Reclaiming Food Sovereignty and Reconnecting to Indigenous Ways of Life. We're so excited that this is the first time our keynote has asked to give the keynote collectively. So we have 4 speakers. I've always thought that would be a good idea, and this is the first time that it was proposed. Oh, sweet baby. Marcus Henderson has a degree in energy resources engineering and has focused his own energies on building low-energy, intentional agrarian community. Did you see what I did there? Which they have been nurturing and beautifully since having the inspiration to start growing food at Cal Anderson Park during the George Floyd uprising. Yes. Derrick McDonald is a Black designer and researcher intent on imagining, making, and maintaining safe and affirming worlds in deep connection with community and the land. Orian Grant is an organizer for Black Star Farmers who was raised in Tacoma's Hilltop neighborhood and often leads outreach and engagement with partner organizations. And soon he'll be working on the Black Star Farmers project, the Rainier Valley Water Resiliency Program. Yes, he will. Yes, they will. And they, them pronouns. Thank you for telling me. Orian Grant. They will be working on the Rainier Valley Water Resiliency Program. Cactus, unfortunately, is not able to be with us, but we're very grateful to Xander for stepping in. Yes. So with that, I would like to ask Black Star Farmers to join us at the mic.
Hey folks, I think we're just going to come up here one by one. My name's Derrick. Oh, sorry, Xander. We could also do this together. Come on. Organizing's like jazz. You just sort of have to improvise. My name is Derrick, and I'm honored to welcome you on behalf of Black Star Farmers to the 16th Annual Strengthening Local Economies Everywhere Gala. I'd first like to thank the Sun and the Stars for giving us this moment to come together and deepen our relationships with and as a community. I'd like to thank the land and the water for nourishing and caring for our bodies and our souls. I'd like to thank the original Duwamish and Coast Salish peoples who have maintained a connection to the land and the water since time immemorial. I'd like to thank everyone who has volunteered their time and energy over the past several years to work in any of the spaces that BSF has stewarded, to include our present cadre of stewards: Xander, Sombra, Misty Dawn, Stephanie, Cactus, Orian, and Kalima. Kindred, Buckwheat, and Motown. Thank you for showing up, for being present, and for celebrating the ways in which we are transforming our reality. Strengthening local economies everywhere. That's a lot. We really don't like doing easy work around here, do we? For a long time, I only understood economy through the lens of capitalism. Supply and demand, costs and benefits, incentives, and scarcity as four key principles to understand human behavior. That was back when I thought that the only way to understand the world was to learn how it is defined by cis-white heteropatriarchy. I know that I'll spend my entire life unlearning these ideas. These are some of the generational curses that we have to break. And I don't just mean black folks. Our concept of value, education, care, and justice have been deeply corrupted by a settler colonial ethic and manifest in material ways. Take these homes, for example. Built on the bones of Black and Indigenous communities, they are a symbol of our cursed reality for Black, Indigenous, and white folks. There's many white folks who own property here in Madrona, and they didn't name this community center the MLK Community Center, because if they were black folks, they would have named it the Dr. Martin Luther King Community Center. Part of the work of being a part of a white supremacist society is being accountable to the harm you contribute and making change. Understanding the world through this lens, understanding the world as property, a collection of resources to connect to a collection of consumers, the idea of productive and reproductive labor, scarcity, are not fundamental principles to understand human behavior. These are powerful myths that maintain social control. These are myths cultivated by white supremacy. The idea that the values and beliefs of wealthy, cisgender, able-bodied, straight, European-descended men are normal, right, and good, and that all other worldviews are deviant. And this is what manifests in our world as whiteness, or the psychic and material infrastructure that normalizes the conditions of wealthy, cisgender, able-bodied, straight, white men. But we don't need whiteness to define economics for us. When European philosophers were ripping off Greek thinkers to develop perverse justifications for the systemic dehumanization of peoples throughout the world, they used economy to help define some of their political theories. Economy comes from the Greek word oikos, meaning home, and neimon, meaning to manage. The question isn't how can we increase supply or demand, or improving our cost-benefit analysis, or avoiding scarcity, because scarcity is a myth and there is enough if we share. The question is, how do we want to manage our homes? Once we deconstruct the myth that the earth is something that can belong to somebody, it's easy to understand how deeply we belong to the earth. We belong to the food that we eat, the water that we drink, the ground that we rest our feet on and that holds us through our days and our nights. And admittedly, in the lifetime of one person, 250 years of American empire can feel like a long time. But indigenous peoples have thrived as a part of these lands for hundreds of thousands of years. This society today is obsessed with the end times. As a millennial, I've spent my entire life inundated with stories of apocalypse. Corporate media conglomerates literally franchise the fear of a dying planet, from major news outlets to billion-dollar entertainment franchises like Marvel. You know why Hollywood has to invent superheroes for us to look up to? Because America has none. And before you offer up people like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. as an example of an American hero, I'll defend my position by saying that if anything, Dr. King is a hero of the promise of America, a promise that remains broken. This is a broken promise we're all experiencing today. We see it in the bellies of babies our economy cannot supply food to. We see it in encampments of people we refuse to house. We see it in prisons full of criminalized poverty. We see it in our courtrooms, or we don't. For white folks, this feels like the end times, but for Black and Indigenous peoples today, this has always been our post-apocalyptic reality, because settler colonialism and capitalism has been coming for us for a long time. Centering Indigenous ways of knowing in our work is not a performance or something to be done out of guilt. Centering Indigenous ways of knowing is vital because the peoples indigenous to this land have belonged to this land longer than any of us. They understand what it means to be in right relations with the land, and their lives, in many ways, have become subsumed by understanding how we have become incarcerated by colonial policy and violence. Black and Indigenous epistemes and ontologies, these ways of knowing and ways of being, are a template for liberation. They are systemic knowledges that focus deeply on relation and connection and center justice in profound ways, because these knowledges and practices were developed in close connection over the course of thousands of years. How do we want to manage our home? Taxonomically? Do we want to inventory every species and subspecies until we've invented racial order and hierarchy? Puritanically. Do we resign the beauty and complexity of the world to abstract and ambiguous concepts of good and evil, opening ourselves up to moral manipulations that actually perpetuate harm and injustice? Transactionally, does every action have an equal and opposite reaction? Are there some debts that cannot be accounted for and therefore cannot be compensated? I'd say America answered that one for us already. If we want to exercise our own agency in how we manage our home, we have to do it in community with the land. It starts with how you nourish your body and your soul. If you want to know how to manage your home, it starts in the garden. If you don't feel like you have access to land, maybe that's an accident. Maybe that isn't an accident. And if the land is too much for your hands to hold alone, maybe that's an insight. There's a tremendous amount of work to be done in liberating ourselves, and the first way to make that happen is by liberating the land. Love it, care for it, nourish it, and it will nourish you. Freeing the land frees the people, and that is exactly what Black Star Farmers has been doing. I'm excited to hear what the rest of the collective has to say about the work we've been doing.
Wow. First off, thank you, Derrick. Should have let you finish. It's all good. Yeah. So I'm going to take it back a little bit. I've been with Black Star Farmers since day one. And I think in terms of getting to where Derrick is talking about, there were some steps and some hurdles we had to go over as an organization in order to get to the place we are now, where we can move forward collectively. I'm not going to talk too much about food sovereignty really until the end, but it gets there, I promise. So it's a little story. 2 years ago, on June 7th, in the middle of George Floyd uprising, I showed up to Cal Anderson with a shovel in hand with the intentions of starting a guerrilla garden. My scope at the time could not have captured what followed. Almost instantly, the garden and myself went viral, and the world came to see me as the Black Star Farmer. Black Star Farmers, with an S, came into existence a week later in a tent next to the garden with a group of community members who had showed up over the past week in support of the garden, who decided to collectively steward the space in honor of the Black and Indigenous lives that are being murdered by the police, ongoing. That purpose would put us on a journey of learning how to hold each other in the face of intersectionality, collective harm, and individual trauma for the next 2 years. So there was a lot there in that last paragraph, but I'm going to focus just on the word collective, because in order to address the injustices that have occurred against Black and Indigenous people, it required us first to figure out what it meant to be a collective and what it means to be a collective going forward. Being a collective means recognizing where power flows and creating agreements to minimize harm and maintain individual autonomy. This is a definition that took time to understand. Since the beginning, Marcus Henderson, myself, has been seen as the Black Star farmer, as said before. The decision to become collective was something that I thought I knew when I made that decision a week after June 7th, but it's something I've had to learn through a lot of trial and error and mistakes. This level of focus on an individual
We love you.
is the norm in this world we live in. As a society, we tend to create hierarchies or recreate hierarchies as the norm, as something we have been taught since we were born. We are used to giving one human being or a group of human beings both the responsibility and the recognition for the work of many beings. And I say beings because it's not only human beings that run this world. It's not only human beings that make this world function. This serves the purpose of removing agency from other beings, which gives a small group of leaders the power to shape the world based on their experiences, skills, and worldviews. Thus, Black Star Farmers' first hurdle as an organization was transitioning to a horizontal power structure, one in which all of us have agency and power, one and the same thing. Agency is power. We identified that power is held in our identities. A term that we used for a long time was identity politics, which explains a lot of what goes on in the organizing world when it comes to, the replacement of power, power being still put in the hands of a few identities. So what happens when power is held in identities is when you have a group of diverse identities being put in a room or an organization together, those power dynamics begin to form and play out, and that is planned. That is something that this society creates institutionally so that some can have and others cannot. They choose which identities have power in certain moments in order to fracture us. Black Star Farmers for a long time was seen as a purely Black organization. But that is not who we are. You can look around and see this group right now. We hold a multitude of identities, some that are not even recognized in society today. Identities holding power is not inherently bad, but when there's not a system of accountability, power can go unchecked and cause harm. Our community agreements that we work together as an org to allow us to do this work allow power to flow within our organization and uplift individual agency as a key part of the work that we do. Now, the second part of that, the two words I wanted to focus on, collectively steward is what I said before. The second part is stewarding. Now, stewarding is a word that I had a hard time accepting, and my good friend, MD over here, has taught me a lot about what it means to steward in community. We are farmers, yes, but at our core, we are stewards. Black Star Stewards just doesn't ring as the same way, sorry. But we're working it out, So stewardship is a commitment to holding each other in community. We focus on the land, but as I said before we can even get to the land, we have to hold each other. I'm grateful for this group for holding me through my own journey. And in turn, I work to hold this group and all of you. And now I'll wrap it back to food sovereignty for a sec. So to circle back, food sovereignty means that we all have to learn how to collectively steward the land and each other, which means that we all have agency and responsibility to maintain this planet's ecosystem. Through the work that Black Star Farmers does, we show people their individual power as land stewards. And just to stay there for a sec, we all have the ability to steward this land. We are taught to believe that we don't. We are taught to believe that we don't know how to grow food, that we don't know how to build our own homes, that we don't know how to raise our own children. We are taught to believe that we do not have the ability and thus we must rely on a system. But in order to have true food sovereignty, we must understand our own capabilities. And that we are all stewards, not only for the land, but for each other going forward. And through our work, we remind people of their collective responsibility as beings that inhabit the land. Those two have to go hand in hand. Because we see too much, there's a few people who believe they have power and that they can steward the land, but they don't have any idea of what it means to be in a collective. So it's important that we do both. This has been my journey and our journey as Black Star Farmers. And yeah, I'm excited to also move forward in community with all of you as we learn these lessons and hold each other. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Xander. My pronouns are she, her. I wrote some notes. No, the wine is a crush. So I have had the tremendous opportunity and the tremendous honor of being able to work with Black Star Farmers for now about 2 months. And I think about the impact that I've made during my stay here and also the impact that Black Star Farmers has made on all of you. My work here impacts on a small level and on a very deep level. I have created relationships with my neighbors, and I have created relationships with the school here and the people surrounding the different gardens that I get to work at. Impact looks different for a lot of different people. Energy is recognized differently by all of us. And in this space specifically, a lot of the impact that we get to have is on the next generation. So we're working in conjunction with children who are running around this space and who get to learn directly from people that they look up to, because I'm just a little bit bigger, but they seem to look up to me. I'm not sure why. But all of the children that I feel like I'm able to impact when I come into this space gives me hope for generations to come, and hope that our message will be interpreted and spread, and even in big ways like that, but also in little ways, like how I was able to cook a dish for you all from our garden and bring it here so that you can taste things from our garden. And I think that that's an impact that I'm able to bring specifically to Black Star Farmers. Is I love to cook, and I love to also provide education with different things that you can pull from the garden and how to cook them and how to apply them to your own lives. Like I said, the impact is different for everyone. It looks like food for a lot of us. We all eat multiple times a day, and we seem to need it to survive. So that's how I feel that I take a big part in being here, even though, like I said, I haven't been here for very long, and I won't stay for very long either. But yeah, I think that I grew up not being able to afford food a lot of the times. So even here in the garden, I get to pick food that sustains my life and myself. I come from a lower income background, and I'm able to use these different foods. Oh. Yeah, so the impact, firstly, is for myself, to better my own life, and then to, once I have achieved a level of healthiness, then I'm able to reach out and branch out to all of you. Okay.
No, we're just fine. Thank you so much. Okay, so I'm crossing off my first point here because my team has done such a great job and the people that I've grown with have done such a great job of iterating the point. So I'm going to bring it home for us. I'd like to reassess two questions we've asked our community in leading up to this incredible event, the 16th annual gala. First, who are Black Star farmers? Our definition reads as a coalition of people with diverse identities working towards the radical reclamation of land and food sovereignty for all beings. Yes, yes, yes. However, this definition really misses the most essential element of our collective shared experience, the one thing that makes us truly dangerous. Black Star is a family at the cusp of Black liberation ecology. We are a radical group of dream makers, imagining a future with Blackness as ubiquitous as whiteness, where brown and Black folks especially realize the power of their presence and joy despite the powers that be. Now moving on, folks, I want us to think about that in context. Theologian and educator Howard Thurman said, "Don't ask yourself what the world needs. Ask yourself what makes you come alive, and go do that." And he's so right. The world does need people who have come alive. This organization is activated in every capacity, in every way. Not only that, they bleed energy and life into their community through the hard work, the dedication, and the labor that we put in. Not only as a collective, but as individuals, this work is measurable. Now, being where we are right now, thinking of our kind of context between history, between what we all have, I want us to continue to think about liberation, and kind of the idea of joy as we go through the rest of this conversation. Our liberated and joyous people are still the greatest threat to a white settler colonial society. I'm going to let that sink in. And to Derrick's point earlier, if these past years...
Mix it up.
If these past years have felt like the end of your world, well, then it probably is. The reality is most of us have experienced some form of oppression, be it through food justice, insecurity, oppression, apartheid, and in some cases just downright hatred for the majority of our lives. I look across this room at people who have not only known this struggle adjacently, but are sometimes just coming to understand it. My second question, what are we trying to accomplish together? I'll try to answer this quickly. Growth in all directions. I'll take this moment to place the onus and confront the structures of violence within myself here. Socialized as male and taught to survive, there have been a cycle of harm both caused and experienced in my journey to physical and psychic liberation. Being a part of a community like this not only grants me in this flesh the chance to liberate, but also allows me and my ancestors to break cycles. What kind of legacy we choose to leave behind is exactly the kind of garden we tend today. These values are extremely old and might seem a little boring if they weren't so damn applicable. So I'll just say it again. The legacy we leave behind is exactly like the garden we tend today. What's guaranteed is the range of harm and challenge that comes from trying to rewrite history. That's a given. What is not guaranteed to us is just how far we will rise and grow to change ourselves in that process. To conclude, Bronte Velez asks us to interrogate what brings us pleasure. The very institutions we are fighting against work to physically deform us, bending our bodies and nervous system away from our full capacity, bending but not breaking our joy. A member of our organization once challenged my desire to center Black joy because the tone of the movement felt too dire. I realized in that moment the depth of our traumatization, where violence and the urgency of this movement essentially stole my comrades' will, their joy. These moments of gathering feel like a chance to share in our collective critique of the world around us, surrounded by like minds, like company. But as I look around at all of you, I see an opportunity to correct and world build beyond this Eden, to spread our collective joy and knowledge because we deserve it, because our world deserves it, because our ancestors deserve that. I'm asking you all in this moment to close your eyes, to allow this energy from community to follow you home like a guardian. I want you to let this sink in to your conscious and motivate you like a promise. We deserve joy, we will attain joy, and we will find our liberation. There are no fairy tale endings, and as my comrade just stated, there's no incentive to allow us to draw the blueprint for our own liberation, nor heroes here to save us. It's up to you and me, this group behind me, Motown and Buckwheat. It's up to all of us to be able to bring our collective energy together, to free the land, to build our gardens, and to tend to our legacy together. Thank you all so much.
Yeah. Next song is going to be also from Chile by Victor Jara. I don't know, many of you know Victor Jara's life, a martyr of the dictatorship in Chile in the 70s. And Victor Jara was a well-known artist who was killed just by the lyrics of the music and because he was a leader of the people. And he wrote many songs. This particular one, he didn't record it, so I learned it here. Most of his music was prohibited. As many, most of the songs we play here they belong to the New Song movement, and that movement was prohibited during Pinochet. And I learned it kind of like underground. So obviously is out now, and this one of the songs that it wasn't recorded is called Walking. Perdón, ¿necesitas el micrófono? ¿Está bien? Caminando, caminando, voy buscando libertad. Ojalá encuentre camino para seguir caminando. Ojalá encuentre camino para seguir caminando. Es difícil encontrar en la sombra claridad. Cuando el sol te nos alumbra, descolora la verdad. Cuando el sol que nos alumbra, descolora la verdad. ¿Cuánto tiempo estoy errando? ¿Desde cuándo me he ido? ¿Cuánto tiempo caminando? ¿Desde cuándo caminando? ¿Cuánto tiempo caminando? ¿Desde cuándo caminando? Como cantemos el pueblo primero y